Hey, what's up? My name is Jose Duncan Jr., and I would like to welcome you to the Unnatural Born Leader podcast. Hey, what's up? Welcome to episode 26 of the Unnatural Born Leader podcast. My apologies today. I am outside enjoying the beautiful weather. New York City, 91 degrees today, so I thought I'd get outside and take a shot at recording the podcast outside. So I hope you guys don't mind. It will be some cars passing, birds chirping, the normal outside stuff you would expect. So the last few weeks I've been gone. I haven't posted an episode in a few weeks, and I began a series called You versus You that I haven't been able to work on. That was mainly due to some family reasons and flying back and forth to California to New York just to handle some arrangements with my dad and my grandmother. So my apologies on that, but life happens, and then we have to pivot and adjust. So happy to be back. Happy to be back recording. Happy to be back on this subject of you versus you. And I'm extremely happy to just be able to speak my mind, speak what's on my heart, and continue to try to add some value to those who may need it, and those who continue to share it with people who they think may need it. So for all the listeners that are listening and have been listening, my apologies for missing the last few episodes. But today we're going to go dive right back into the you versus you. I think this is an important segment because I want to remind everyone that the greatest battle is the one that happened between us and us, our minds, our hearts, how we speak to ourselves, the question we ask ourselves daily. That's a battle every day, and I feel like that battle is never truly won. There are small victories, but it's something you constantly continue to work on, and the ultimate goal is to have a cohesive understanding that you will forever be working on you and not trying to necessarily conquer or win, but just really find that equal balance. Today we're going to be diving into this concept of not knowing everything. I think that, especially for me growing up the way I did with the personality I had, I felt it was important for me to know everything. For whatever reason, I felt knowing everything gave me a competitive advantage, or it gave me a leadership position to know everything and lead those who may not know. And as I grew up, that mindset kind of manifested more, and I began to, discover more about myself, about life, about football, which I was playing at the time. And transitioning to my young adulthood, I've been realizing that this idea of knowing everything, or pretending to know everything, or wanting to know everything is extremely counterproductive to learning. Is a guy I follow, Jim Quick. His book Limitless I've been reading lately, and it's been talking about how to learn new things, how to retain information, how to make yourself smarter. And he continuously mentioning this consistent approach to learning. And it's not about knowing everything, but necessarily setting yourself up to learn new things continuously. We may not ever know everything there is to know, but the goal is to learn as much as you can. And I've been practicing some of these techniques. So for like the last 2 years, just practicing how to learn new things, how to apply them, how to implement them in my life, and see what it does. So you versus you, this episode is about not knowing everything, but also learning everything you think you need to learn pertaining to a particular skill or topic. Started to listen to a lot more podcasts. I was already listening to podcasts continuously before I started my own, but a few months back, I discovered a guy named Justin Sua. He's a mental performance coach out in Florida. He's a mental performance coach for the Tampa Bay Rays, the baseball team. And I've just been listening to his podcast continuously. Shout out to him. He's an amazing guy. A lot of gems, a lot of bite-sized messages, and he posts every day. So it's great to consume. And he continuously speak about some of these concepts that I'm going to discuss today. And I've heard him say a lot about humility. He talks a lot about just being humble and understanding what you know and what you do not know, and to seek help and how to use different skills to find help, to find resources. And he particularly shared a quote in his most recent podcast. He was doing a series called Building Confidence, and he shared a quote that stuck out to me. He said, "If you're not willing to learn, then no one can help you." All right? Let me repeat that. He said, "If you're not willing to learn, then no one can help you." I thought that was an extremely interesting quote. Slightly a bit on a negative side, but I think addressing that side of, you can call it negative, or I call it negative in some cases, is important because it makes the context of what he's saying have a lot more understanding, right? And I compared it to me in my life as I've been writing my book, and in my book, which is coming out later this year. I speak openly about this idea of not asking for help and why it was so difficult for me to even ask for help in my life. And I think it really stems from this idea of, I got this, I know this, or I can figure this out myself. So in many cases, that can be interpreted as me thinking that I know everything. And I'm not willing to learn from others because I'm not willing to ask for help for the thing I need help with. So although that, I guess, stubborn resilience or stubborn ownership of things definitely worked in different areas of my life, in the book I also talk about how detrimental it was to my growth and my development as an athlete, and also as a man, as a young kid growing up. So this idea of not be willing to learn and no one being able to help you is an interesting concept, because a lot of times we may run into people with that personality of, I know, right? You tell them something that is important, or you try to advise them, and they may not see it that way, and they tell you, I know. I know this because at certain times in my life, I was that person. I was the person who said, yeah, I know, man. Listen, I know. You don't got to tell me. I already knew, right? And that kind of attitude makes people not want to help you. It makes people not want to give you any feedback or any information because they feel like you're going to reply that you already know, or you're going to have an attitude of, I already know this. Why are you telling me this? And when people stop wanting to help you and teach you and advise you, it can be really bad, because we are not always right. That's something I've had to learn the past 2 years as well. We are not always right. As much as our ideas and our values make sense in our heads, it is not about you being right and others being wrong. There are 7.6 billion people on this earth. There is no way that we are right and our perception of things are the right perception of things. So we cannot assume that we know what it is to know and others don't, right? So along with that point is, perception is important, because we both can know the same thing, but we may perceive it differently. And that's okay as long as we're able to come to a common agreement or a common solution. Book, I decided to write a chapter, and I named it Find What Works. It was a piece of reflection of my life where I was searching for ways to figure things out. And for me particularly, I'm a doer. I learned by applying my hands and my mind to it and figuring it out. So whereas some people are thinkers and they're critical thinkers, and I would say I'm that as well, but they can make sense and play their steps in their mind, and they can go over the entire structure of how something works in their heads before they actually begin applying with their hands and things like that. And my girlfriend's a lot like that. She's really, really good with just seeing the entire structure come together. For me, I need to do. It may take a little longer than others, but I need to do. And I always thought this was the right way to do it. I always thought just going right in and playing with it and figuring it out is the best way to do it. And I would not say today that is not the best way to do it for me. But what I've also learned is that finding what works as well as applying what you think may work requires you to learn as you go. And sometimes just doing, you may learn a lot of important steps along the way. But I think taking time to really understand exactly what you're doing is huge. It's huge. And we may not want to take a step back when we're so deep into it, because I know I don't. So when we're so deep into a project, to take a step back and learn, take a step back and watch a tutorial, take a step back and ask a question, take a step back and gather more information before going back in. Sometimes I feel like we're so far in it that we cannot take steps back. We want to finish. We want to be gung-ho about it. And sometimes the final product is not what it should be because you rushed it or because you did it incomplete. And I've dealt with that for a very long time myself. So that chapter of finding what works was really about this idea of using whatever resources or tools I had to get through something, to learn something. And then my realization of knowing that I may need to take a step back and rediscover and relearn and then dive back in has been a huge help. And I've got some of that from my girlfriend and other friends who are good at that operation side, good at the thinking side, the critical thinking side. And I consume some of that teaching they give me or advice, and I add it to what I already know, and that's how to do. So that combination creates a great balance. So that's important for learning, the learning side of it. You don't know what you don't know, right? Many of you may have heard that quote, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know because you haven't been in situations or you haven't been tested in ways where you learn what you don't know, right? And I can mainly compare this to when I'm starting a new project or taking on a new whatever it is. I want a new task, a new skill. I start to see the big picture of the skill or what I need to learn, and then I start to do this thing where I reverse engineer everything. Reverse engineering bigger, larger tasks has been the only way that has worked for me, mainly because along the way, as I'm learning the steps and I'm learning what to do, I'm realizing what I actually don't know. And I haven't discovered that I didn't know that unless that task or that challenge was in my face. So reverse engineering tells me that I have to look at the big picture from small incremental steps and ask questions, ask harder questions. And I do this mainly when I'm taking on a new skill, like editing videos or learning how to use Adobe Photoshop or Premiere Pro to edit exercise videos, right? Where I'm in it, the software. I'm in the software. I get into it. I'm looking all over the place. So many buttons, so many things to press. And for me, it's not about looking at a tutorial of how to use the entire system and then trying to use it. For some people, that's effective. For me, it's all about playing with the controls and then having an idea of what I want to do and then going to find out how to do that thing I want to do. And I learn, apply. I learn, apply. I learn, apply. Rinse and repeat. Learn, apply, learn, apply. Because I've never been really good at learning a lot in one chunk of time and then going to apply all of it at once. I must learn and apply as I go because it's one of the best ways to retain the information, to learn the skill, to really understand what I'm doing with that task. And Jim Quick talks about this in his book, Limitless, of taking this idea of learning and stopping learning into going to application to retain information you learn. And even he refers to some of these techniques like the Pomodoro technique when we're doing tasks where we are 25 minutes focused, non-multitasking, working hard on the project, and then we take 5 minutes where we disconnect and we reflect on what we learned. And I've been practicing that with different projects that I'm working on right now. But small things like that and intentional steps like that help us retain information, help us know more. This is all about learning and what you learn, how to apply it. The goal is not to learn everything, but the goal is to learn enough so you can do the most you can do, right? So I think that's a continuous way that I've adapted addressing new things in my life and new challenges is to understand what I do not know. And you will not find out unless you're put into situations or you are pushing yourself to complete new challenges where those new questions and those new challenges will continuously arise. Don't be afraid to suck at something new. Don't be afraid to really be really bad or be really shitty or your first product isn't the best glamorous looking product. And Justin Sewell talks about that as well, having this idea of not being perfect and not allowing perfection of a task or perfection of a project to kill your ability to start, to kill your ability to apply. And you want it to be perfect before you even begin. That's a huge issue, right? So I think, just going on a rant on that topic of perfection, I think the idea of being perfect works for a lot of people. It helps them stay detail-oriented. For them, that's how they complete tasks the best, when they're aiming for perfection. And I understand that, and I don't judge for that. But I also, on a second point, believe that perfection can definitely kill our ability to know more and to do and to learn by doing, because we try to learn everything we can. We try to know everything there is to know before we even begin. And then when we begin, we realize there's so much more to know. And sometimes that can frustrate us because we feel like we spent so much time learning everything there is to know that we should be going right into things and there should be no bumps along the way. But the truth is, whether you learn everything before or you learn everything as you go, there will be a continuous learning period. So I think that we don't know what we don't know until we have to know, right? So I think that's an important concept. So to close it all out completely, I want to really talk about how we can learn better, how we can really control our ability to want to know everything, but instead learn everything that is to be learned about something in particular. And it's about being specific and honest and open and looking at things with a critical eye. So the best way I've learned from a lot of mentors, a lot of reading, a lot of podcasts, a lot of being infatuated, I can say, with personal growth, is that we must ask ourselves difficult questions, right? We must ask ourselves very difficult, critical questions when we're faced with new tasks. Because if we're not asking those difficult questions of ourselves, then we won't be looking for complex answers. If we ask the easy questions or the questions we think we know already, we're never going to go out and search for those complex answers. But instead, when we start asking critical questions and really looking at something with a very critical eye and thinking deeper than the status quo, will we force ourselves into finding better answers? Because there are better answers out there. I know that because there's this thing called, looking at the same thing 5 years from now and realizing that it's telling you a different message than it told you 5 years before, right? So let me clean that phrase up. Someone can give me an answer to a problem I have today. And based on what I know and what I think I know or what my experiences are, I can interpret that answer based on that stuff. I can interpret that answer based on where I'm at right now. But someone can give me that same exact reply, same exact answer 5 years from now, and it means something completely different. Why? Because I'm in a different space of my life. I'm in a different understanding. I have different experiences. I have a developed mental preparation, right? My perception of life, of my life, is different now. So that same solution or same answer someone gives me means something completely different. And that stems from asking harder questions as we get older, as we go along. For every new challenge in your life, there has to be a new question asked, right? How are we going to grow as individuals and really fight the battle with ourselves if we're not challenging ourselves to answer harder questions? And asking ourselves better questions is not easy. It's not easy to deal with that level of accountability and acceptance, right? It can be extremely difficult to admit that we're asking ourselves easy questions and we're taking the easy way out and we're not pushing and we're not challenging ourselves. We all experience long periods where we're not challenging ourselves. But in our minds, those questions of why we're not challenging ourselves continue to circulate. We may ignore it. We may not search for answers, right? It's easy to ask questions and not get answers, right? But if you ask a question with the goal to get an answer, you'll get an answer. It may not always be the answer you're looking for or you want, but you'll get an answer. You'll get an answer. And I think that's important for understanding what we don't know and admitting that we don't know everything. In order to learn these things, we need to ask harder questions, right? Look at the history of almost everything. Someone had to ask the question, why there are no lights? Someone had to ask the question, why there are no vehicles? Someone had to ask the question, why are there no weapons? Someone had to ask those questions. How? How can we get these things? How can we get these resources, right? How can we get these homes? How can we build homes? How can we house people? How can we feed people abundantly, right? Someone had to ask those questions. Those questions had to be asked. And then when you ask those questions, then you go on a search for answers and solutions. I'm always fascinated by like these large companies, Facebook, Microsoft, Tesla, Google, all those big tech companies, Alibaba, all those guys, Amazon, can't believe I missed Amazon, and how they develop their companies and how they develop this idea and this brand. And from my point of view, I can see how they ask larger questions. They have difficult challenges where they ask critical questions about how they can grow the company, right? And then they have a group of engineers, a group of educated minds who go into the lab or go into their databases or whatever they use to find solutions. Right? That's why engineers are paid so much money, because they are solution finders for larger problems. If we want to create a whole database that helps people do something user-friendly and it's convenient and we can get it down in 3 clicks like Amazon did, right? You can order something for 3 clicks and it's at your house in the next 2 days. That's amazing. But that had to be a question asked by the CEO of Amazon. How can I get delivery faster? How can I separate from the competition here? How can I stand out? Easy. I'm going to make it easier to order something with 3 clicks, and I'm going to make it faster and more convenient to get to their homes. Amazon Prime, right? So everything that grows to a certain magnitude started with a question. It started with the what if. It started with the could this work? Those people did not think they knew everything. Or we wouldn't have all those things. We wouldn't have the iPhones. We wouldn't have all these things if they believed they knew everything. But a continued search to find out and continued search to learn and apply and repeat that cycle of learning and applying. Years later, you realize you have something of great substance. And it all started with you admitting that you don't know and committing to finding out. So that battle is truly happens within ourselves every day. And it can be hard to admit what we don't know. It can hurt our pride. It can hurt our egos. But we don't know. It's okay to say you don't know. Because in those moments is when you grow. In those moments where you are admitting that you don't know, will you be willing to start asking how? How can I find out? How can I know? Right? So you versus you. This battle is happening with us every day. And I wanted to talk about this concept of not knowing and be willing to find out. So I hope you got some value from that. I hope you guys continue to support the podcast. And thank you for tuning into another week of the Unnatural Born Leader podcast. I ask you to continue to leave a review, share this with friends and family who you think may need this. You may not need it particularly yourself. I'm happy if you do, but please share with people who you think may need it. Anyone. I hope that there's something in this podcast that can give someone value, can give some direction, and mostly give some perspective as individuals so we can grow and we can be better and we can lead others to the knowledge that we have now. So thank you for tuning in to another week of the Unnatural Born Leader podcast. And never forget that positivity is contagious and attitude is everything. Have a good week, guys. Stay safe. Stay healthy. I'll talk to you guys next week.